Welcome to our video training on preparing a funding opportunity for awarding applications into grant tracking. The steps discussed in this video are critical to managing the grant and subcomponents of the grant. What we're going to show you today will affect your forms and grant tracking, claims, and possibly status reports for the entire life cycle. If you do not follow these steps in the correct order. If not followed, you would have either blank grant forms, or even more dangerous, you could have two budgets that would combine your claim forms. So let's walk through the steps necessary to prepare the funding opportunity for awarding into grant tracking. So we're going to log into the system. The step one is a verification of which forms you want to include to use in your grant tracking. So prior to awarding the application from final approval to the system actually creating the grant and grant tracking, you must go through verification of which forms you will be using to manage all of your grants. So from your menu, I want you to go ahead and click on Funding Opportunity. And then you would select your funding opportunity title. The page you see here is the funding opportunity components and associated forms page. So I want to go over the different types of forms that you will see in your grant tab on this associated forms bar. Now you have subcomponents that are system documents and forms that actually help you do the process of managing your grants. For example, you have claims, you'll have appropriations, encumbrances, status reports, contract amendments, site visits, correspondence, contract, closeout, and inventory. Other forms that may be listed will be like your program area specific forms or global forms that the user has created or copied from the application, like the budget form and any other standard forms you may have. So now let's talk about the linking or copying application forms to the grant forms. This is a step two. This is verification of grant forms that are set to have data copied down from the application forms. This is what we call linking with the grant. So WebGrants has the ability to copy data that an applicant has entered on their application forms down into the grant forms if that application is awarded. However, it is not necessary to copy or link all of the forms the applicant has entered data on. You will hear me talk about linking or copying throughout this training video. The complete application and all attachments from the application that the applicant has submitted will be automatically copied to the grant as a static view. So you will never lose any of your data or the data that they entered on the application. You can always view all the attachments as well. The forms that you should consider copying or linking to the grant are what we would continue to manage for the entire life cycle of that grant. The point of the system is truly to build a complete life cycle from beginning to end. So it really isn't necessary to copy or link attachment forms or any application form that you will not update through the complete life cycle of the grant. You normally will always link the budget because you will continue to manage the budget throughout the whole life cycle with your claim reimbursements, and you may even have contract amendments. Another example of a form that you may link would be milestones or scope of work, possibly any form that you would use to update the progress reports of their project, something that would show in a status report. You can verify what forms are set to link with the grant in the application tab. So if we click back and go to the application tab, and if you click the edit button, I want to show you the forms that you're seeing. There is a column showing copy to grant, but do you see how it's locked down? Setting the application form to copy to the grant is viewed in the funding opportunity but the action of setting it to be copied is actually done in the form creator. We will get into this far more in the form creation in subsequent videos, but for now, we just need to have you know where to go to set the form to copy. You may or may not have access to the form creator where we're taking you next. This is a security role privilege that can be assigned to you. If you need access or need to make this change, contact your program administrator. So from the menu, we will click on Utilities and then Form Creator. This screen will allow you to see your program area and your global forms. This will also have you can access your application forms, your grant forms eventually, and you will see the number of forms. So over on the application column, you'll see that we can select the number in your program area forms. So once you select that, then you'll scroll down until you find your form. Now, please note that on the right-hand side of your screen is a column that is the copy to grant. What we are looking for is the form that you would want to set to copy. So you wouldn't see a check mark there. And another thing that I want to note is that one way to verify you have the correct form is by hovering over the in-use column. This allows you to see which funding opportunities are actually using that form. Once you've verified and identified your form, you must click on the very right-hand column called Form Properties. You'll click that edit button. Many people make the mistake of clicking on the form name. We are setting properties for this form, so you must click on this edit. Another critical note that I want to point out here is when you are someone that is initially creating the form, you would never set the form to link or copy to the grant unless it's been tested and approved for use. So we'll discuss this in further detail in later trainings. So at this point that we are doing this action of linking or copying to the grant, this form, it is tested and approved. So if you look over on the right-hand side at the top of your screen, you will see a button called Link with Grant. You will click this button and it will be the first step in setting the form to link to the grant. Next, you will see now a new screen, and this is your second step. There's a new button called Create Linked Form. So click on that and it will take you back to your application forms listing. If you scroll down to your form again, you will now see the Copy to Grant column is checked. There are other functions that you saw on the previous screen, and you will see on this screen. And again, you'll have more information on subsequent videos later in the training through the form creation training. So, okay, once you set up the form to link, what we want to do is go back to the funding opportunity to confirm that all the forms are showing correctly. So from your menu, click on Funding Opportunity and select your funding opportunity and click on the Application tab again. You now should see that all the forms that you chose to link to the grant in the form creator are showing as such in that column. So now let's click on the Grant tab. Just a little helpful hint here. If your selection of forms is too large to remember, open up 2 tabs or 2 browsers and use one for the application and one for the grant. So you can actually see the forms you've chosen to copy to the grant. We want to make sure that anything that you add as a grant is needed. If you have set an application form to copy to the grant, then we definitely have to make sure that that grant form is appearing in the grant form listing. If you do not see them, you must click Add and add them to the grant forms list here. If you do not want to include certain forms that you are seeing, you would click the Edit and uncheck them to not include them. So make sure after you do these actions, you click Save. Now we have some other options that you will need to make further decision on. So let's go ahead and click Edit Grant Forms. You will need to decide if you want to, number one, alias your forms. So aliasing your forms allows the person who created the form to name it appropriately when they created it, but you may want to alias the name of your form to a totally different name for your external users that are completing the form. So at this time, you'll make all the decisions on what you want to name each and every form that will show on the external side. The other thing that you want to make a decision on is your form security. So this is whether the forms are open to either side or locked down on the external user side. You actually have three options, and I want to explain each of these options and how they work. Your first option is grantor only. The form is only visible or editable to the grantor, which is the internal user. The external user or grantee doesn't even know the form exists. You're hiding it from the grantee. Your second option is grantor edit only, which means that it's editable by the grantor or the internal user, but visible by the grantee, who is the external user. The grantee is able to edit when the grantor or the internal user negotiates the form back to the grantee. This is how you will choose to set up the majority of the copied down forms from the application, so that your grantee can't just log into the system and have access to edit the form and overwrite the original entries that they were awarded on. What we are creating here is an audit trail, and the majority of the forms that were copied, you'll want to set as grantor edit only, so that it has to be negotiated back to them, which creates a new version when they submit it back. So the last option is grantee edit. This allows the forms to be accessible by both the grantor and the grantee, so both internal and external, but the data in the fields is updated. They're actually overwritten each time it's entered and saved. So typically this option is rare, unless it's like a contact form that you want the grantee to come in and update periodically on their own accord. However, if you are using any of the system documents, such as claims, contracts, or status reports, these will always be marked as grantor or grantee edit. They must be able to actually get into the document to create their claims or status reports and submit. What I mean by that is, if you have a large file cabinet, which is your grant tab, and each file drawer is the cabinet, is like your claim document or your status report document, you have to give the grantee or the external user the ability to open the claim and the status report drawer to see what's in it. So that's why those you would leave open for grantee edit. We will get into this further in the claim and status report tabs, but for now, just try to remember this analogy. Now let's look at the stage column. This is what the grant stage is of your grants. So you have two different stages. You can either choose awarded, or the most common is your underway stage. The awarded stage will be used very seldomly. On some systems, you can choose to show some of your forms in the awarded stage of the grant, such as maybe the contract or even correspondence. If you do not see this option working, if you set this option here, it is because it's a system property that will allow this function to be available for all program areas. Please be careful setting your forms to awarded stage. This can be very dangerous unless you are prepared to let the grantee in early and before everything is set up and ready to go. Now, the underway stage is most commonly used because the system is typically set up by default to block or not allow your grantees to see their grants at all unless they are put into underway status. So for this video, we will keep all of them in underway status. The other item we want to cover is how you can order your forms in the order that you prefer all of your users to view in the grant component listing on the grants. There isn't a right or wrong. This is truly only a preference. Again, don't forget to click your save button after you've made all these changes in your grant tab. Very important. We will follow the same procedure for all the tabs on the Associated Forms bar in subsequent videos. This can be done at this time or any time prior to introducing the subcomponent to the grantees. The system is not dependent on the subcomponents to award in the grant tracking, nor do you have to use all of the subcomponents. They are optional. You can select which ones you want to use for this particular funding opportunity only. Once this task is complete, you are ready to award your applications from your final approval into grant tracking. So thank you for watching our video on preparing the funding opportunity for awarding applications into grant tracking.